This story happened to me a long time ago, back in 2001. I had been out of work for months and was walking around town like a bum, watching people live. In general, I was in a state of drunkenness, until one day I got a job as a truck driver. Despite the heavy schedule and sleepless nights, I almost immediately fell in love with my new profession. I loved driving across the vast expanse of America. There was something special about it, something that magnetically pulled me behind the wheel of my huge truck every time. I happily continued to transport various cargoes until one day something terrible happened. It was October 21st. Early in the morning, I suddenly received an order from the dispatcher. I needed to take a load to another city, which was relatively close, in a neighboring state. Since I had no other flights planned for this week, and as you know there is no extra money, I gladly agreed to this job and began to prepare for the trip. I left the city the same day at about 13 hours, and after an hour I was driving fast on the highway. This highway was the only major road in the area. I had been driving on it for more than 1 year, and so I had had time to get to know it well. There had never been any high-profile accidents here, or at least I was not aware of any. As I continued driving along the road and admiring the surrounding views, at some point I noticed a man. He was standing on the side of the road actively asking for a ride, waving his arms and showing some signs with his thumb. Then I immediately noticed a few oddities. First, the stranger's car was nowhere to be seen. That could only mean two things. Either the stranger was hitchhiking, or he had come out of the forest and was looking for someone to give him a ride to the nearest town. Secondly, the man looked dirty and wild. His face was almost invisible because of his thick beard and long, dirty hair. His clothes seemed very old and worn out. Of course, at that moment I did not pay attention to all these strange details, and decided to do as I would like to be done to me. I stopped near the bearded stranger and asked him what was wrong. "Hello, how can I help you?" "Hello," the man replied and continued. "Trouble has befallen me. Help me out, please. My car is stuck nearby. I need to pull it out of the mud." "I can't do it alone," said the man in a hoarse voice, examining me with his ash-gray eyes. "I can help you, but where is the car?" "It's in the woods, not far from here. I got into a hole, and now I can't get out. So you'll help me." "I'll help you, just give me a minute. I'll get my tools." "No tools." "I have everything there. Let's go," said the stranger. Then he turned back sharply and walked back to the forest. Moving after the strange man, I together with him came to a rural road, which according to my memories led to an abandoned village, where no one had lived for a long time. It was very strange, and so I decided to ask a few questions to make sure I was safe. I had to break the silence with my question. "I'm sorry, I didn't ask you right away. What's your name?" "Bill," the stranger answered. "Nice to meet you. I'm Sean." "Where were you going, Bill?" "There's no one around here. I was in a hurry to see my relatives. There's a village nearby. If you go straight ahead, you'll come to it." "Wait, you mean that village that's been abandoned for 10 years? "Yeah, my relatives bought a house there. They live there now." "How'd you get stuck here?" "It hasn't rained this week. The ground is dry." I asked the second question I was interested in, scrutinizing the man ahead of me. "The hole is so deep, I didn't notice it at once. You'll see for yourself when we get there," Bill answered me, continuing to stride confidently forward and looking around with some interest. Soon we came to an old yellow pickup truck which had fallen into a hole with its right front tire and was standing on an incline waiting for help. Seeing this picture, I immediately calmed my imagination and began to think of all possible solutions to the problem. "Listen, let's try to pull your pickup out with our hands first. And if that doesn't work, we'll use tools. Are you going to push or drive?" Bill asked. "I'd rather push," I said. "All right, let's get started." Bill got in the driver's seat and turned on the engine, then began to slowly press the gas pedal. Meanwhile, I tried to push the car forward as hard as I could to get it out of the hole as quickly as possible. All our efforts were in vain. The car was so badly stuck in the mud that it could not move an inch. Thinking of nothing better to do, I took a short pause for rest and then walked over to the pit. I sat down beside it and pondered aloud what to do next. I think I need a little digging. The wheel is too deep in the mud, and some plank would be good too. You could put it here. But I couldn't finish what I wanted to say, because at one moment I was hit hard in the back of the head from somewhere behind me. My eyes went black and my mind went blank. I woke up in some gloomy room with no windows or even a small crack where the light could get in. It was quiet, and there were only occasional loud thumps coming from somewhere above. It was as if someone was vigorously chopping meat with a huge knife. My poor head was buzzing like a drunken binge. But that didn't stop me from remembering everything that had happened to me the day before. I thought of beating Bill. At the same moment, the room I'd been in all that time was filled with the sound of chains, which made me flinch and look in the direction from which the nasty sound had come. Looking a little closer, in the gloomy darkness I noticed something gray and alive sitting on a chain in the farthest corner of the room. For a moment I felt a wild fear. I wanted to run as far away from the hole as possible, but suddenly I felt a large metal ring around my neck, keeping me locked up, like the last dog. Then my nerves couldn't take it anymore. I started pulling the chain as hard as I could, trying to free myself from the illegal captivity. But to no avail. The shackles were nailed to the wall, and left no chance of escape. After numerous attempts to break the collar, I was tired. I sat back down on the cold floor, wondering what to do next. In the darkness, time stretched on endlessly. Once in a while, still from above, I heard sounds. Something heavy would fall on the floor, or footsteps would sound. All this suggested that I was probably in the basement of a very old house, inhabited by a family of savages. In an instant, my attention was again drawn to the familiar clinking of chains, reminding me that I was not the only prisoner in this madhouse. "Hey, can you hear me, friend? Have you been kidnapped too?" Slightly revitalized, I said quietly. The response was silence and light breathing, as if whoever was there was asleep and hadn't heard my questions. Then I gathered courage and said a little louder, "Wake up. This is no time to sleep." Suddenly there was a groan. The sound gave me goosebumps. The stranger was asking for help. I could only guess what horror he had suffered during my absence. Then voices came from above and footsteps approached the cellar door. "Hey, I'll help you, but don't make any noise and don't disturb me. Okay?" As soon as I finished speaking, the wooden door creaked open, and a bright light from a kerosene lamp entered the dark basement. The little pig squealed. She was being led to the slaughter. The little piggy fell down and was cut with a saw. Slowly descending the stairs, a savage hummed. Judging by his voice, he was still young and inexperienced, which later became my main advantage. As soon as the barbarian descended into the cellar, I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep, so as not to draw attention to myself. As he approached me, he paused for a moment and shone his flashlight into my eyes. Then he went to the opposite corner, where there was another prisoner. "Well, hello, little piggy. Admit it. Did you miss me? Are you pretending to be asleep? I see. Well, we'll wake you up in a jiffy." The villain said it all in a calm voice. "Don't you dare yell, pig. You hear me? Don't you dare. Mother doesn't like it when food screams," the savage said angrily, once again poking his captive with something sharp. When I opened my eyes slightly, I saw something that made me sick. In the corner, chained in chains, sat a badly tormented man. Or rather, a small part of him. His arms and legs were completely missing, and his naked body bore many stab wounds. It was not at all clear to me how he had managed to survive with such injuries. I could also see the little bastard standing with his back to me, holding a long stick with a point on the end. He looked like a normal teenager, ragged hair on his head, skinny arms and legs, a little hunchbacked, but at heart he was a monster and deserved no mercy. Well, who's the new guy? The savage decided to switch to me, but he didn't even realize what a sad end was ahead of him. I opened my eyes sharply and gave him a blow, thanks to which he fell to the floor and dropped his terrible weapon. Next, I had to strangle the bastard, and preferably without making too much noise. I was lucky. Upstairs, they didn't hear the death convulsions of their son and continued to go about their business quietly. While I was hurriedly searching for my keys and removing my shackles, the mangled boy continued to moan, but did not lose consciousness. His eyes burned with the fire of revenge, and he looked with great pleasure at the corpse of the man who had abused him without uttering a single word. "Hey, buddy, are you all right? What did they do to you?" I asked, walking up to the guy and examining his injuries up close. "What are you saying? I don't understand." Looking closer, I soon realized why the guy was talking in such a strange voice. He had no tongue, probably as punishment for yelling a lot and trying to negotiate with his captors. "Okay, stay here and don't go anywhere. Wait for me. Okay, I'll definitely come back for you. I promise you," I said lastly. Then I picked up my spear from the floor and went up the stairs to the first floor. I quietly opened the wooden door and saw a small corridor, on the walls of which hung lamps and nailed pictures of different people. Apparently these were the victims of these sick psychopaths. And just at the moment when I was about to leave the basement to move to the next room, a small axe suddenly flew out from somewhere from the side and stabbed into the door with all its force, 5 centimeters from my face. I turned sharply and saw an old woman rushing toward me. She was holding a bloody kitchen knife and was already swinging it to deliver her fatal blow. I quickly realized the situation and put the spear point forward, then waited until the crazy woman came closer and thrust the tip of the spear straight into her throat with all my might. There was a wheezing sound, and the body collapsed to the floor in a flash. At that moment, I expected to be attacked by the main villain or their son, but to my surprise there was silence in the house, and nothing else was heard except the sounds of the dying old woman. Then I decided to look around a little and see where the father of the family was. When I entered the kitchen, I was horrified. I had never seen anything like this, even in the movies. The floor, walls, ceiling, everything was smeared in blood, and on the table lay the already cut corpse of a man. His head and organs were neatly stacked in containers. I was also surprised by the open refrigerator, where there was another severed head of a man and many jars with canned meat inside. These things ate people, luring them into their lairs and killing them in the most brutal ways. How exactly they managed to lure their victims, I was already well aware of, and I did not even think about the rest. The only goal was to survive. From somewhere on the street I heard approaching footsteps and an eerie whistle. Grabbing the knife on the table, I took a convenient position for an attack, and like a predator on the hunt, waited patiently. A few seconds later, Bill came in the house, happy and unsuspecting, who was trying very hard to imitate a tired spouse returning from work. "Daddy's home. I'm ready to eat a whole leg. Susan, set the table," he shouted across the house. After taking off his shoes and jacket, the ogre moved leisurely down the hallway, and then, apparently noticing the results of my efforts, he shouted loudly, "No, no, not again." While Bill, leaning over the corpse of his wife, was screaming, I took advantage of the moment and crept stealthily up to him from behind. Just as I was about to attack him, he suddenly turned around and hit me hard in the face with his fist. I had never been punched in the face so hard in any fight. Nevertheless, I was able to stand on my feet and fight the savage. The next few minutes passed like a blur. I only remember that we beat each other as if we had been sworn enemies since childhood. At the end of the fight, by some miracle, I managed to throw Bill so that he fell into the basement and immediately lost consciousness. After catching my breath a little, I noticed a slight puff of smoke in the house. Looking down the hallway, I saw the cause of the fire. As it turned out, one of us accidentally touched the kerosene lamp hanging on the wall. It fell to the floor and broke. Time was running out. Gathering the rest of my strength, I rushed to the basement, where my new friend was still. It took me a few seconds to free the guy from his chains. Then I took him in my arms and quickly ran out of the burning house. Good always triumphs over evil, and my story is a prime example of that. In the end, the lovers of human meat together with their house were burned and went to hell, and we together with my new friend managed not only to survive, but possibly save dozens of lives. I found my truck in a clearing not far from the abandoned village where the cannibal's house stood. There were many other abandoned vehicles there, whose owners had fallen into this trap just like me. I took my friend to the hospital that night, and then went to the police station, where I told all the horrifying details of the day's experience. With my help, the police were able to solve a couple dozen murders, as well as find the main reason for the disappearance of people on that stretch of highway.